Now, once in a while, I do sort of kind of mini series in my own channel called "What Did the Ripoff Stole for the Original." This basically a little mini series. I usually focus on two similar ideas, two similar shows that are super similar but yet super different. Usually, I just talk about ripoffs, but more and more I'm making this video more and more challenges. I'm trying to make this video interesting. One of the big examples is Mr. Birchum stole from that versus. Even that, both series are completely different. Even that, I can actually make other comparisons with other shows who have more similarity to Mr. Birchum, like King of the Hill or Parks and Recs, because both two series have very similar characters, similar themes, similar ideas to Mr. Bertram. But the only problem is that a lot of people have done that. You have decided to maybe do this, but in a different show who can actually compare and contrast, even though it's so different genres, different actually audience, and yet they're so similar, but if one pulls it off, the other one falls apart. And that I decided that versus Mr. Bertrand. The reason why they actually are very similar. The fact that even the creation have similar steps to being made. In fact, both shows are made by desperation of a new company who needed more entertainment shows. Both shows are created by sort of comedy people, but actually want to make a sort of a live action sort of sitcom, and little by little they decide to make it a cartoon. Even that, the two main leads of the both main shows are very similar. A basically normal 30 to 40 kind of white guy who is angry about the world. They feel against each other, and they always are right. Once again, it doesn't sound very similar. Sounds very the same. You feel one riff of the other one, but no, there are many other shows who does this, but yet both shows goes a completely different direction. Even that different genres. But even that said, either one does it better than the other one. Even with restrictions, it does it miles better. And today I gotta show you what's the difference in similarities of that versus and Mr. Bertram, because you'll be surprised how similar and also how different and how well executed it really was. Now, before I get started, my name is Rachel. I like to talk about animation, not just animation, do reviews, first impressions, cartoon theories, and sometimes, if I have some spare time, cartoon breaking news. Of course, you'll like how it's going, you'll like how my channel, like, comment, and subscribe. That's all you need to do. That's all you need to do. If you do, thank you. If you don't, that's alright. But you do, you are helping me getting close to my main goal to 1,000 subscribers. And yes, I am so close to that goal. And thanks to you, all people who like, comment, and maybe share or subscribe if you choose to. If you don't, that's fine. Now let's start with the video. Now let's start with Mr. Bertram. If you've never heard of it, I highly doubt it because that show is very trendy in the last couple of weeks for obvious reason, because it's sort of incompetent to understand how to tell a story. Well, not just a story, characters, comedy, genre, everything, but yet it feels so familiar that I couldn't put my finger on at the very beginning till I realized it feels like that versus. That versus is sort of a very comical, sort of satirical, two bros sort of hanging out, and one of them is Dan, who is very paranoid, very enthusiastic, but yet he always gets in trouble and he's always right. But the difference is, Dan versus is a very interesting show because it feels like a sitcom meant for adults, and yet is made for young kids. And that is sort of surprising to compare Dan versus, Mr. Bertram, because Mr. Bertram is sort of you follow a white collar dad who is a teacher in this high school, and he hates everything new. He basically a boomer who complains, and he sort of how his point of view or his basically saying is the past is better, not here, but not really adding any commentary. And this is the point how both series really go completely different directions. But yet, the more I can talk about it, you can see the similarities little by little. How both of them are right. How both of them trying to say their way, and also both of them are usually a little odd. But the difference is that Dan versus something's wrong with him, and he knows it, and his friends knows it, and little by little he semi realizes it. But yet he feels more believable than Mr. Bertrand, because Mr. Bertrand, he's never wrong. Even if trying to convince people or convince your society, your children, my son, my teachers, my co-workers are completely foolish because I'm right, I'm super perfect. To compare to Dan, that is obvious he's not perfect. Obvious something is wrong, and people keep pointing at it. Mr. Bertrand also does the same thing. People do point, he's over exaggeration, maybe he's overthinking it, but he never feels challenged. Even if he was challenged, he get out of unscathed. To compare to Dan versus, he come out with broken bones, being arrested, being well known in the city of Los Angeles, and his friend just stuck to him because he has almost like a believable bromance, but even not. It's not really a bromance. It's almost how the best describe it. Their relationship is like a father-son type of relationship. They're always trying to talk him down to not do the foolish thing. Mr. Bertram has also a best friend that he's gay. He works in the high school in the district, but that's all we actually know. That you know they're best friends, but you don't know how to describe their relationship. The only thing you know, oh, they were buddies. Or how about his love life with his wife? Is his wife. And that's it. His son and daughter. Oh, her daughter is the same as Mr. Bertram. And his son is a gamer. The more I keep talking about it, it's just so simplistic. The point that feels like a pitch Bible. If you don't know what a pitch Bible is, basically it's how you sell the show with the company you're trying to make your own show. That sort of describe a little by everybody how they sort of semi connect, but not really showing the full picture till it actually is done and actually they bought it. In other words, that's what I mean. Everything of Mr. Bertrand feels like a pitch Bible, not fully yet developed. It's trying to sell you instead of showing you the development, the comedy, the relationship, or defining who's who in that show. Dan versus, just watch the first episode. You'd be amazed how much things you get out of it. You'd be amazed how well written, how everything's so set up and established only by one episode. You just need to watch one episode. You get it. You get the fun. You get the relationship. You get the situation that Dan gets into. Mr. Bertrand is the opposite. You watch it, you're waiting for the punchline. You watch it, you're waiting for the storyline. You're watching some strangely quirky character, and it sort of falls apart because you're wondering, okay, what's the joke? What's the setup? What's the action? And you, before you realize, you fall asleep because you don't know the direction. And that's weird because the whole point of Mr. Bertrand is being out there, being unsensitive, trying to be insulting but funny, something like South Park or Family Guy, or something mature and allowed to say while being restricted. But compared to Dan Versus feels super mature, over adult, but super crazy and wacky, but they never lose their point of view. Affect the conversations. That is probably the most best aspect of that versus because it does intrigue you. Especially you have two main leads. Dan and I think his best friend was Chad, if I'm correct. Yeah, he talks to him, but talks to the scenario situation of, I don't know, you sure this guy's a werewolf? And that's the conversation. If this is real or not real, even though it's sort of ludicrous, but conversation says so much. Even that the conversation I'm talking about is the first episode. Because the first episode, Dan versus someone scratches his car, he believes it's a werewolf. But you have to wait till next month, full moon, to actually find this guy. But it's Halloween. That's what his best friend Chad says. you being delusional, you being odd. It gets weirder over a top. A point that Dan actually kidnaps a young man wearing a werewolf mask, wearing sneakers that he believes he is the werewolf. Obvious, it's not a werewolf, it's the kid who asked in candy. But even that, Chad points out, what's wrong with you, kid? That he's bitter what his best friend did, but he points out the kid, what do you think is a good idea? Go inside someone's house getting candy. What's wrong with you? And you, Dad. And it continues on, but yet it's hilarious, believable. You understand the relationship and the situation that put himself that is on edge. And remember, this is meant for kids. You mentioned a stranger picking up a kid inside his room, interrogating him because he's a werewolf, but not realize he was sort of tricked by candy. That is red flags. That is you should not do. The only time you're allowed to do that in an animated series is adult comedy. And that is sort of the weird part because this is meant for young children or family content. And that is surprising because Mr. Bertrand, the opposite of a show that has no restrictions. You could say basically whatever you want without any backlash. Even the fans would probably be angry. They don't do nothing that extreme. Never do something so weird, so questionable, but yet so funny because it just outdated. It really doesn't realize what he actually wants. There's a reason for it because when they created Mr. Bertrand was sort of idealized as sort of angry teacher from Vietnam. That could be kind of okay. It was sort of the 90s nowadays. Nowadays, you have to sort of change it up and update it to be more believable and more interesting, but it's not. If we show you how not very creative the show is of Mr. Bertrand, even that has the freedom to do whatever it wants, even doesn't have the money for it because it's sort of obvious the animation is not that good. You see how they fall apart. To compare to Dan versus, they have a budget, but they're wise how to use it, experience, and understand the idea because the original idea of Dan versus supposed to be a sitcom from two bros trying to stop the other one doing something foolish, but he believes he deserves being vengeance. He deserves justice. And that's sort of the gimmick. But remember, that's supposed to be a sitcom. But the creators decided, no. They make it a cartoon because it'd be more funnier. It allows to do more crazier stuff. And it does. And that's the amazing part because each single episode is attempt to sort of one up it or make it a little bit more reader or make the conversation more interesting. In fact, the second episode is basically Dan versus uh, Mexico, not New Mexico, Arizona, that he was sort of pissed off because Arizona broke his car. The whole state, Arizona, broke his car. He wasn't in Arizona. He just found a letter. So he takes venture to her Arizona, the state. Even that gets weirder. He realized, or he does his research, that the only way to hurt Arizona is basically hurt their balloonist sort of kind of ride kind of deal that was sort of created by cultists who are sacrifice a woman who has naked. But remember, this is a family-friendly kid show. A cultist half-naked woman being sacrificed by balloonists because there's a cult. So we can hurt it Arizona. And compared to Mr. Bertrand, they don't go that crazy. At least not the first four episodes doing this recording. In fact, the final or fourth episode of Mr. Birchum, they actually focus on him being stuck in the office, specifically his workshop job, that he got stuck by a saw machine, he being delusional and stuck there for more than 24 hours. Being sort of delusional, getting flashbacks, and in his own mind getting more crazier because he can't escape. So, you think it would be very creative, very over top, very cartoonish, but very trippy for the adults. And not really. I mean, it tries, but it feels just sort of very basic. Put it this way, Dumbo from the Disney movie version, animated version, does more trippy stuff than that Pacific episode. Even that Dumbo is a very old animated movie. And that says a lot because they could go darker, but they don't. They could go trippier if they don't. They could be more interesting, they don't. They could focus on the relationship, but they don't. Or the conversation of any of his relationship in Mr. Bertrand to define what that is relationship if they don't. And that's sort of the frustrating thing because you do so many things and yet chose to not. It was okay, it was sort of a sitcom show in trying to be a sitcom show, but it feels a very generic sitcom show. And that's the problem. Even that they just don't know what to do because they don't want to challenge their audience. And that's fine. That's okay. That's not nothing wrong with that. But you have to challenge the character, challenge his beliefs, challenge his relationship, challenge something that is interesting. If you don't want to challenge him, make it more funnier, make it more weirder, make it more experimental. And yet they do nothing. Remember everything I said of Mr. Bertram, put that to Dan Versus, and Dan Versus, just watch any random episode, you'll be for a trip. If you don't like the show or you disagree the relationship of Chad and Dan, there is semi toxic, but yet Chad is sort of guy who stand up for himself. He doesn't take Dan's crap. He has his moments to be the Chad he really is, and that is sort of interesting because they really show you the first episode of Dan versus the relationship. There are ride and die kind of bros. Even that the relationship is not a bromance, it's a dad and his son relationship, and his wife who actually basically adopted him, but metaphorically, not literally. But yet, it's just so fascinating, almost like a train wreck. In fact, the whole show feels like found family. You could really define who's the mother, who's the dad, who's the son. Just watching 2 episodes, you get it. To compare to Dan versus, you really don't know just the titles of the name, best friend, son, wife, daughter. That's it. You don't really get to know what is the relationship, what their kind of likings, even they have sort of likings, is compared to Dan, but not Dan, Mr. Bertrand, that even that he doesn't have a personality. He just like, what? Making stuff and complaining that there is enough to make a personality or make fun of it or make comedy jokes, but it doesn't want to. They feel that's too scared to challenge the audience because it's on Deadly Plus. Because Deadly Plus is sort of not challenging. And that's okay if you make the show fun, but they don't. To compare to Dan versus, that thing is just a ride. They sort of question everything, but not answering anything. Like they don't say anything about the cops, but they have cop jokes. They have make fun of people who are deaf, but not really making fun of deaf people. And that's the interesting because they know what they're doing. They don't want to piss off the left or right political spectrum because the very end, that there is to show you Dan is insane. Dan is a theorist. Dan is right. Werewolves scratch my car. There are cultists who use balloons in Arizona. Dan's best friend's wife is a secret agent, and you accept it because how the world is built to be believable, grounded, but super outrageous, and yet it never really feels talking down. It really doesn't feel that the show doesn't know what it's doing, and that is interesting. Even that Dan vs. only lasted 3 seasons, this show is just so beloved for a reason because it knows it's here to entertain you. You see Dan, Chad, and Chad's wife to see how they go their daily lives with Dan because Dan versus he's insane and you like him, even you disagree with him, even all the things he does, just so ludicrous. But he is right. Absurd, weird version he is, but at the same time, he's not like an asshole. I mean, he is, but he get his comeuppance. He is the person you question. He's wrong, And compared to Mr. Bertram, he's right. He's flawless. He's a Mary Sue. And that makes a character boring because, let's face it, Mr. Bertram and Dan, put it side to side, they're very similar. Even that they have different backgrounds, different situations, they act very similar. Even if one is more like a theorist, anything else, but yet that versus you are entertained. You just watch one episode, you get what the show is. Even that you'll be surprised how mature it really is because he does do very odd sort of scenarios like being arrested and actually continue being arrested and kind of references the things like being arrested. Be careful, don't sleep on the chair because someone will abuse you. They actually say stuff like that in a PG cartoon series compared to Mr. Bertram, that is, remind you, it's an adult series. They never go far enough. They never go adult things like go to DMV or go to a mechanic or go to your job or something like that. Something mature, but it actually pushes an extra mile to be more mature. And that's the interesting part. They never does. Even that, the little moments, they don't have it. Mr. Birchum do not have that little moments. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Dan versus have little moments like Dan's best friend wife question chat saying, "So if Dan jumps, will you jump in the bridge?" And Dan pauses. He thinks about it more than once. Her wife keep asking that question. It's as a joke, but you get his friend. You get he is dial right with his best friend. Even he's sort of toxic, that you still believe it. That confirms how much love he has his own friend. Even that he have more extra little moments like how Chad kisses his wife. He has that sort of moment you kiss your wife or your lover. In other words, you say she or he or they eat chips. They had chip butter over the face. He still kisses her and licks her just to mess with her. And remember, this is PG. Once again, that's sort of kind of cute, even though it's disgusting. It's their thing. Mr. Bertrand never have that little moments. I mean, they try to, remember how Mr. Bertrand and his wife met and never repeat that moment or have that special moment, him and his wife, or him and his son or her daughter, who is the basically the most similar to him, but they don't do nothing unique. Never that have daughter and dad moment. They work together. That quiet moment that confirms what is this relationship. They never does that, and that's the problem. They just don't want to piss the audience they have, but because of thinking that way, they never make comedy. They never make something interesting. Never make something controversial compared to Dan versus. They just want to watch one episode questioning, are you sure this is meant for kids? Because it has a lot of weird moments that could be very questionable. Even that Dan versus doesn't have swearing, doesn't have gore. He has blood, but that's sort of super rare. That says so much. That says you don't need to be swearing, cussing, ripping piece apart. You can go very delicate such a manner that the left or right disagree. Is that you need to be funny and know how to execute it. And that's the reason why that versus is always beloved, became a cult classic in the cartoon community. Mr. Bertrand doesn't have anything. I mean, it's sort of hard to say something or defend it or anything because it doesn't say anything. And that's the main problem. It's worse not saying nothing than saying something. And that I only thing I can say because one has love, the other one doesn't because it's too scared to say anything or show emotion. And the other one doesn't give a damn because it says everything and it leaves his emotion in the sleeves. Even if it's wrong, they're still likable. It's still as forgiveness. It has heart. And that's basically the huge difference of Dan versus and Mr. Bertram. They are so different, but have some similarities that you can actually see. Or at least that's how I see it. Of course, I did over exaggerate. I did maybe stretch this idea Tell me down below you feel they're very similar or not. Honestly, I can say nothing else to say. Just thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and have a wonderful day. Bye.